Hey everybody at TPE, this is Chris Moon back with another series. Hopefully, if the order goes right, this will be the second of 3 consecutive series that I put out in a row for Tournament Poker Edge. This one's going to be covering a hand history review of WCOOP final table of the 320 6Max Shootout. I know shootouts aren't really common outside of WCOOP or Scoop or other big series online, and this is especially so for American players. But I decided to do this series because I think its major contribution can be to make you think more critically about your approach to tournament strategy. Each of these matches, with maybe like the exception of the final table, played like a must-win final table, where the only ICM implication should be which of these options gives me the best chance to get heads up and win. And you'll see my strategy was basically just any way that I could, I wanted to get heads up, and I knew that if I got heads up, I had a chance to win it against just about anybody at the table. I've been relatively successful in a short sample size in shootouts. I have a final table in similar events in mini F-tops, Scoop, Mid, and now the WCOOP format. Shootouts are unique in that they force you to combat every single person at the table, and you can't really get by on just exploiting 1 or 2 people until your table breaks or until you move to different tables or someone gets moved, etc. Nobody moves, your table plays down until somebody wins, so you're forced to combat every single person. So I think throughout these videos you'll see that when you don't have that avenue where you can just pick on 2 or 3 spots at the table, or emphasize exploiting one tactic or another, in these formats you kind of have to expand and play like a much more versatile game, in my opinion anyway. Like for example, I noticed over the course of the tournament I encountered a lot of super profitable rags that I've encountered before, and both that I noticed on SharkScope were huge winners. And it became pretty apparent as we got down to 3-handed or heads up play especially, that they didn't really optimize a strategy for shootouts. If it got short or heads up, they didn't take advantage of exploitable patterns, both by myself and by others. So anyway, in short, my goal for the series is that we're going to do 1 to 2 parts on each of the first 3 matches. I think based on review that I've done for this so far, each of the matches should take between an hour and an hour and a half. So these videos will be about 30 to 45 minutes a piece if I break it down into 2 pieces like I think I will. So we'll do that for each of the first 3 matches, so a total of hopefully at most 6 parts. And then we'll do I'm planning on doing a joint hand history review of the final table replay. It said at the start of the tournament that there was going to be one. I haven't seen one come up just yet at the time of this recording, but when that comes out, I'll do a joint hand history review, hopefully with Jamie K, for the final table. And even if there's not, I'll just cover it in the last part. On the same time, I took second in my first match of the second chance as well. So even if the final table, which will probably only cover like half an hour's worth of material, if that's the case, I can still do like half an hour on the DVD extra, I'm calling it, where I play in the second chance and I get heads up. So we can talk about that heads up match for quite a while as well. So anyway, we're going to get started on part 1. Okay, so starting match 1, before we get going, I just want to run over the notes that I had on each of these players, both before the tournament started and after looking at SharkScope before the matches started. Ilyuchenko, who I think takes second, is a break-even player after his sit-and-go losses, and I noticed in the shape of his graph that he's been consistently losing over the course of a year. Lou Mimes, I guess we'll call him, was a slight winning player. Mikal was locked out, and I didn't have any notes on him previously. King Bait was a small winner, 17% ROI over 7,000 plus MTTs. And a losing player over 4K sit and goes. Oh, I bring up the fact that and I had Duke pre-marked as a fish. So anyway, the reason I bring up that I looked up their stats, especially their sit and goes, was obviously since this is a shootout, it's like a series of, multiple sit and goes running concurrently. So I felt that how they perform in sit and goes was equally as important as to knowing how their overall scheduled MTT game was as well. I noticed late in the tournament while I was waiting for the matches for the final table to end so that we could start the final table, there were 3 or 4 people still remaining in the tournament that were just like big losers at playing big MTTs, but were just huge winners at sit and goes. And so I figured this is a tournament where sit and go strategy applies pretty well as well. Although it plays a lot deeper than a standard sit and go, and I don't think there's as much push fold as you guys would commonly think. But other than that, sit and go strategy holds weight here. So anyway, match 1 lasts 306 hands. So we're just gonna run through just about as many of the highlights as I possibly can, and focus more on every single hand as the tournament gets down, to heads up and 3-handed play. My overall strategy for these was to just try and play pretty straightforward from the beginning. Since everybody's stack is the same and we're really deep, I have some time to afford to play a little more straightforward and more passive early. It's not really going to affect my chance of winning the tournament too much. And then also, this gave me a good idea for like how table flow was going to go, who was going to be someone who's going to fight back at me, and vice versa. Especially since the only person I had a note on was Doot, and Doot, my note really was just that I had him marked as a fish, so not too much in detail. So pretty much most of the decisions that I'm going to make for at least the first 15 to 20 minutes of this video are just going to be pretty straightforward decisions, and I'll try to make sure to vocalize later when I make decisions that are different from standard and why, and like based on what reads. So this being 6Max, and the fact that I have a hand as big as queens, pairs are a lot bigger from 6Max versus 9Max, as you probably know. My options here, I don't think folding was ever an option. My options here were to flat and just try and play passively post. However, Kyle being cold calling from the dealer button, the fact that I was going to be playing first to act in a multi-way pot just increases the chances that I'm not going to win the pot, and could potentially increase the chance that I bust the tournament if I were to get coolered or something. So I felt, although a 4-bet here is going to look really strong, and I don't want to look strong when I have a strong hand, I felt the 4-bet was just the best scenario, or it was the best case for this scenario, and that I don't want to play out of position in a 3-way pot. I want to try and make this heads up and have control of the betting. And if I can win 650 chips or so from the onset for free pre-flop, like I don't mind doing that with queens. So that's what I do. I make it about the size of the pot when I was faced with the decision. I think it was like 650. So I make it 639. I'm not going to be incredibly excited if I get 5-bet ripped on, especially when there's no real dynamic. This is, hand number 5 or whatever of the tournament. There's no real like meta game dynamic, but regardless, 4-bet goes in. I'm put to another really big decision pretty early. I open ace queen of spades under the gun. I generally actually make this bigger. I think I was going with the min raise just in that. Gonna try and play as much small ball as I can. I hate using that phrase, but just because I think over the long run, as long as I lower the variance and just play like the best game that I can, I should come out on top of these matches more often than not. And I get 3-bet by Ilyuchenko, and he makes it pretty big. He 4x's it. This sizing, in my opinion, usually screams like, if it's a value raise, it usually screams like a sizing for like ace king, for someone who's just like afraid to play ace king post flop, and it's kind of like gets me back to the way like old guys when they play 1-2 or 2-5 say like, oh, I hate this hand, it never hits a flop, or I'm always in trouble with it, and so they just try and not see a flop. They try and just win it pre. Not saying that that's what he's doing here, or like what I think he has specifically, but I know also if I'm to flat here, I think Duke, being fishy as he is, would be inclined to flat as well. And now I'm seeing a pot of 1,200 with a stack of like 5K behind, and I know I'm going to be facing flop and turn barrels a lot of the time. And on top of all that, there's not like any flop that helps my hand, with the exception of like 2 or 3 spades, is going to be a flop that I'm not too sure if I have the best hand. If an ace hits, I'm still going to be playing it pretty cautiously and not putting in too many value raises. If a queen hits, same thing. I'm not trying to like get my whole stack in, especially with like an SPR of 4 or greater. So I just opt to actually just fold this. I know it comes out to, it might seem pretty nitty on the surface, but we're like, this is hand 8. I don't want to like bust my stack in hand 8 when I know over the course of a couple hundred hands I should be able to win these chips. I just decided to let it go. And I'm pretty excited about the result. Dude overcalls, and like I said, I played him as pretty fishy, so I didn't think too much of this. It comes queen high, so again, one of those flops where I think I'm going to be just calling, and there's not really too much value in raising. So again, like when I have a hand that doesn't have crazy good implied odds, I just decided to fold here. I had the spades, but so obviously I'd be calling about a 445 now. So in theory, there'd be 1,200 in the middle, plus this bet would be bigger. So I'm facing this bet. I'd have 5K to start the hand. So maybe if I'm facing a bet of between 600 and 700, then I have 4,300. What would be one of my least favorite cards now for his range and my specific hand would hit the turn. Now I have a queen, best kicker with a flush draw, but I beat almost none of his value hands. Goes check, check. 9 pops the river. Shouldn't change too much for anybody unless he was calling with a gutter. He bets between a third and a quarter pot and gets looked up by jacks. So yeah, like although I would have flopped the best hand and gotten turned, I mean, there's a lot of scenarios in this given spot based on my read of his sizing that I'd be losing a lot of chips. Like ace XX flops, I'd be losing a lot of chips calling 3 barrels. So had he sized it differently too, like had he made it like a pretty standard size or just slightly bigger, I'd probably be calling and just kind of like bemoaning my unfortunate luck, with the way this hand ran out. But the way that he sized it just made it too expensive for me and was gonna increase, like kind of made it much more of a, it would have made it, much more variance happy. I don't want to be stuck in that spot 8 hands in if I can help it. So like I said, my decisions early were fairly straightforward and fairly much more on the nitty side, and I was perfectly fine with that. And Ilyu off the bat was definitely the person taking more control. Based on some of his showdowns, though, it's possible that he was just on a big stars rush, but either way, he was definitely the aggressor early. Lumi gets like semi-coolered pretty early, but I don't think Dude. My read on Dude was that he wasn't going to be tripling off here with a bluff, so I can see why he just called the whole way down. But yeah, like I said, Ilyud in there calling a 3-bet, finally folding to a double barrel. I'm just content folding here again. Dude, like I said, I had him on the fishier side. If he's 3-betting with a hand worse than ace-9, then good for him for now. Soon enough, if that's the case, soon enough we'll figure it out and be able to push back. But until then, I'm okay with folding there. Ace-8 here, getting 4.4 to 1. I think ace high is some of the time good, just overall good here. Definitely don't need to defend, especially based on some of the criteria that I was talking about earlier. I opted to defend, getting such good pot odds, and not really putting myself in a chance where I was going to bust my stack in this a single raise pot. So, but I defend, it gets bet and then called, so pretty obvious fold. It's bet and then Mikhail raises. I would say a fair amount from regs here. This is just a raise so that they don't have to face a triple barrel. He doesn't make it that much bigger, so this could be like a hand where Mikhail has just either got like a weak king, or like as strong as a weak king, or as weak as like a 7-8 suited hand, where he's just gonna like raise, get if we see he's a reg, and if he's locked out on shark scope, I would guess that he is. So that this makes Lumi shut down with a lot of his air, and with a lot of his like weak hands, Mikhail will just like see a river or see showdown on average cheaper. He gets called, and then also not to mention there's like really strong hands in there too, like 5-6 suiteds where he would have just flatted pre, 7s he might have just flatted pre, and 4s he definitely would. So there's that option as well. See, and then it goes check check. So yeah, I mean, not 3-betting and then raising the turn. I'm not like a huge fan of raising the turn, except for the reason that I gave before. I like it better on boards where it's possible that you get called by much worse. For example, like flush draw boards where he could have just like the bare nut flush and you don't want to call, you just want to see river for cheaper. Or on boards where it's even, or in situations where it's like even more possible for him to have a hand like 8-7 suited or like a 6-7 suited where you can raise the turn and then just snap check back the river. But in this particular instance, I guess this is better than calling and calling, which like a hand like aces is definitely going to triple off there. So I like raising there too, where one reason I do like raising there is that it balances your range, where it's not just like always a set and it becomes pretty obvious to just anybody with a brain that you're just always raising huge hands on the turn there. And also when you're raising as a bluff, just like when a bad card would hit for what you suspect their range is, and you put in a raise to try and freeze them off their hand. Again, someone with a brain is going to figure that out, that you're just trying to like raise them off and play back at you. So when you're not necessarily polarized to like the nuts or nothing on the turn, when you have raises where it's like marginal showdown hands, I think that's an important thing to do with some frequency against people who are regulars that you're going to encounter over and over again. Balance, as I've said in many other videos, is incredibly overrated in tournaments, especially big tournaments where you're not going to see a lot of the people you're used to seeing every day. This kind of got an unconventional hand. I guess I'll run it from the start. I went open, 3-bet, 4-bet, bet, call, check, 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 and then overbet shove. I don't have too much to say except that like king bait does have ace king quite a bit there, and I don't really see how he has too many just like airball bluffs there, based on the fact that Lumi 4-bet him pre-flop. So could be wrong. I'm pretty much the fact that like Lumi's not short in terms of relation to the blinds, but one of the shortest at the table. I'm content to open 8-4 suited here. I'm not psyched about getting 3-bet if I do, but I was also just going to establish the fact that I'm going to be coming at the blinds too, so I did this here as well. King bait trying to get to showdown, it looks like, on the turn for as cheaply as he could, and he did it, and was kind of unfortunate that Lumi actually had a hand. I might be donk leading a hand as strong as ace-7 there on that flop. I can come up with good reasons for and against it. This match of the three is definitely the least fresh in my head as well. I've gone over it once before this, but in terms of like what I was thinking in game is probably like about as weak as it gets for me. This is the first time Ilyut has 4-bet and he folded. Whoops. King bait's been doing a lot of 3-betting in that particular spot. He appears to be pretty sticky too, so I'm going to be balancing my hands toward hands where I'm fine if he doesn't fold. These are just two hands that are going to get in, I think, on this given flop. Lumi played it slow, but I think it's one of those spots where, yeah, when you play it slow, it'll keep in some of his bluffs, but it's kind of a spot where I think the majority of the time anybody could have clicked the all-in button at any point and gotten called, so it doesn't change too much. Lumi with queens again. I think Doot my read on Doot was that he was playing hands much more passively and he was a weaker player in general. I think this is like a hand that the majority of people watching this video would be super content to double barrel, and I would totally agree with that. So going check call on the turn felt like it's not worse than check folding, but it seems like it's the worst option in my opinion. So on this given board, when Ilyutchenko could have a variety of inferior two pairs, pair plus, and a ton of pair plus straight draws, and even like a hand as bad as just like ace-10 here has a significant amount of equity still going to the river and will certainly call just about any bet. So there's not too much better and there's a significant amount of worse. So betting the turn, I think, incisively is like by far the best play. Checking and calling, and like Ilyutchenko is like, I think I like his bet here a lot for the same reasons, but also because even if Doot's playing passively and just check calling only hands that are better than 9-10, you don't have to face a river barrel if it goes check check, because Doot the majority of the time when you miss is going to be barreling the river and you're going to be left to a decision. So you can just bet, like I would have guessed like 1/3 pot, and that's about what he bet. You can bet that and then just snap check back. Sort of the same thing that Mikhail was doing earlier, but in a totally different situation. So yeah, I think Doot lets himself get exploited here a little bit by not just double barreling. I mean, like I think this hand would be like a pretty obvious triple barrel spot in this given situation. And then this is kind of where I've started to make an adjustment where I'm like, okay, Doot is a guy that's going to be good to target, and he's going to be where some of my chips are going to come from if I'm going to win this table. So like immediately after seeing that, I just like pop in a 3-bet with like Queen X suited. I think like against him, I'd start picking like Queen 7 suited is probably on the low end, but like Queen 8 suited or better, I think is getting 3-bet against him. A lot of King X suiteds are going to get 3-bet against him, although like his peeling range will include some kings that have me dominated. And then like suited aces for sure, and pairs, and just an assortment of hands are going to get 3-bet against him in this particular spot. I also like it, I mean, I'm not really worried about my particular hand here, but I also like it better. I like 3-betting against his under the gun opens now a lot better because King bait's like a little bit of a spaz. It seems like early. I don't want him to be in the pot if I can help it. Except when I have hands that have like huge implied odds, like low pocket pairs, I would probably flat so that King bait can flat, and if I flop a set, I might get a stack. But then I don't have Lumi behind me with like pretty obvious a squeeze spot here, so it helps to like dry up other spots for other people as well. Is this? I believe this is a hand. Yeah, this is another hand too where King bait and Lumi go at it, and I think they both seem to play it like pretty unconventionally. Lumi check calls, c-bet, and donk leads a turn, but like a pretty small amount where like King can pretty much just call with, he can be content to call with pretty much all his pairs that include a diamond, and then like any bear diamond, and especially like straight draws with a diamond. So like I think Lumi's donk lead with his particular holdings like makes almost no sense in my opinion. I think he just kind of like merged his hand into like trying to rep diamonds for no apparent reason. Then he bets about half the pot on the river. But again, like I think this is pretty bad in that this is bad unless he has diamonds, I think, because he's laying, by betting half the pot, he's laying king bait 3-1 to call him, and so king bait can be pretty confident he has the best hand, like almost like enough percentage of the time when he has pretty much a 10 should be good a ton. Doesn't make sense that Lumi would be check calling like a jack X hand, and every time he has a queen he should be calling, and most of the time he has a 10 he should be calling, and every time he has a jack he should be calling. So like it shouldn't really make sense that Lumi has too much of a hand here given his line as well. And sure enough, like king bait's going to be psyched to call 2 streets with that hand. So betting the turn, I don't know, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're not really repping. That's why I said, like, you're not really repping diamonds even if he thinks he is, and that's why I think betting when you have diamonds there is better, ironically. I open, I get 3-bet. He makes it really small, and we're going to see that he makes a habit of doing this. When he's laying me 4-1 to call, even if, you know, I show a chip loss on average by, a small chip loss on average by calling here, or maybe like, I show a larger chip loss on average by folding here than I do by calling, so I'm going to call. I could start to mix in 4-bets, but this isn't the particular hand that I want to do it with, and also not the given stage of the tournament that I want to do it with either. I don't stand to make a huge chip gain by 4-betting, and then I just open myself up to getting 5-bet or bloating a pot. So, you know, I only stand to win like 320 chips, and I would have to put in a 4-bet of at least 500 and something. So the gain just isn't really there. So this is the best of the 3 options in my experience. I jacky bets, I flop pretty much nothing. Again, post flop, like this could be maybe like a spot to check raise, but I'm just not going to get into it with him at this point. Bet and raise and fold. First we've seen from Mikon a little bit. Antes are in play, so I would expect that it's going to get a little more aggressive. There's about the size of a big blind in the middle every time, so 2.5 big blinds to be 1, just about. Opening this for sure. If I'm opening 8-4 suited, I'm opening king queen off. Again, I could see some arguing for an open here. I opt not to do it. Defending, I think, perfectly fine against Mikhail here. I'm folding to doubles a lot, but I don't know how often Mikhail's doubling, so I'm just going to like see what happens, basically. Should be an okay turn for me. If I was beat, I'm still beat, and if I wasn't, I'm still not. Goes check, check. Not my favorite river. I lose to some hands that would have c-bet that flop that still I had beat, like queen 10 and 8-10, king queen, king 10 for sure. So not my favorite flop, or not my favorite river, excuse me. But luckily it goes check, check, and I just win. I mean, he could have barreled that turn and won with his particular holdings as well. He could have semi-bluffed that turn and won. Maybe he just thought that if I'm calling, I either have a 9 or a jack, and on the turn he's afraid of getting check raised. So I think I probably 3-bet this. Yep. Ace-X, especially 6-handed, bound to be good. We're going to start testing to see if he's going to peel me in these spots. You know, with an ace block, I don't expect him to peel too much worse, but with an ace blocker, I have the best hand a bunch. So just win the chips in the middle plus the antes and move on with my life. Dude opens. This is kind of like what the strategy I was talking about earlier, where I would 3-bet him, yeah, with a bunch of hands to try and exploit his passiveness. But also when I have hands that have huge implied odds, I kind of want to see if I can get other people involved. So, you know, I don't in this particular instance, but I still like this the best. He c-bets, it's a pretty good flop for my hand, and I know he's going to c-bet. Even being this passive, everybody knows to c-bet this board. So I'm going to float one and see what he does on the turn or river. He checks. This could certainly be a spot where I check back. I thought that this was a spot where I'm protecting my hand, where like an ace king, ace jack, ace 10, I mean like all his air, if I check it back, I'm susceptible to losing to his potential 6 outs plus a queen double pairing the board, so 11 outs. So between a fifth and a quarter of the time I lose on the river. So if I can just bet and win this hand now, I'd prefer to do so. No, I can't get called by better ever, I don't think, against this particular opponent. Excuse me, I can't get called by worse ever by this particular opponent. But that withstanding, I think betting here is better than checking back and just trying to get to showdown. I could just bet. I could bet like much smaller and just bet like 3-3-3, and or maybe even like Daryl would bet like 220 or something here. So I could have saved myself chips by betting much smaller. And he check raises, which for me is just like, okay, this hand's over. If he's ever bluffing here, congratulations. There's no way I'm calling there. Maybe he's onto the fact that I'm kind of picking on him a little bit, but regardless, with my particular holding there, I couldn't do anything about it. I open 10s and I get called in 2 spots by Lumi and Mikhail. Flop is 6-3-4. I'm c-betting this with and without it all day. Just c-bet and take it. Not too much to add to that one. This is a hand I would hope that I 3-bet, because this is a really good spot to do it against him, and it's one of the hands that I talked about sooner. Yep. The hand gets kind of weird when Lumi just cold calls the 400. I think my guess is that I would be playing super passively post when I miss. Just I think Lumi's hand is a pretty strong hand. He doesn't seem to be like completely off the reservation except for that deuces hand. So check to me. I think this would be actually an okay spot to bet, like 480 to 500. Just see if I can win this pot now, and if I get check called, then I can just, there are some good turns for me, and I can just check back and try and see a river. But I also thought that Lumi has like a ton of, like when he does this, frequently it's like hands like ace queen and ace king. So I think in game I just ended up checking back, and this might be like a multi-tabling mistake, but looking at it now, I guess I could bet like 480 and just see what happens. Like worst case scenario, I get check raised. I don't think I get check raised a lot on ace high boards, as you might have learned from videos I did with Daryl. So I don't think I get check raised a lot on ace high boards, and there's a lot of backdoors for me that I can see for a lot cheaper. Instead of someone leading the turn, like when a spade hits, and now I have to possibly call one and then see a river for more than what I would have bet on the flop. But I check back. This is like another one of the spots where if someone leads like 600, I might be calling. Actually, I might just fold this one, but checks again. Now I feel like I'm not repping anything. I think in game that's what I thought. It's like I'm not really repping anything. What the hell am I going to try and do? Betting this turn. So I think I check back. Yeah, I miss. Lumi bets out. I mean, he very well could have had some of the hands I was talking about and just played it slow and thought he was going to get a barrel on the turn from somebody. He could very well have been leading the river because nobody's bet, and so no one ever has anything. But the way that I played the hand, you know, that hand just got a little too weird for me. I don't really like the way I played it, and I'd play it as I said now, but so that's why you do these things. If I'm 3-betting ace-8 off, I'm 3-betting ace-queen for sure, and same result. So now we've kind of established that Ilyut's going to open and fold from that particular spot. You know, that spot could dry up when he gets sick and tired of me doing it, but for now it looks like he's doing a lot of raise folding from the button. These two get in it again. no more money goes in after the flop, which I think is a small mistake from king bait. Let me say why. Open and a call, check and a bet and a call. I say this is kind of a small mistake from him in that Lumi's action here is almost never hand as strong as a straight, and with some small frequency it's a flush, but the rest of the time it's like flush draws, it's pair plus straight draw combos, and it doesn't always have to just be jack high as well. Sometimes jack high with a spade will check raise this board. So I think he can bet for value with a hand as weak as queen 10 one more time. I'm not saying make it like 600, but I am saying that, you know, there's a fair amount of flush draws and like pair plus straight draws that will call another one. And then you open yourself up to a really tough decision when if you have an opponent who's going to turn like a missed flush draw into a big bet on the river, and you have a hand as weak as queen 10, then you're putting yourself to a tough decision when you check back the turn, he thinks you might have nothing, your hand's now under repped, and you run into like a 600 chip bet on the river. So that's why I like betting the turn better. There's some value and it makes your river decisions easier. Both A+ reasons to do it. Kind of zooming through these a little bit. Sorry, but I want to get some hands in. I want to try and make this like 2 parts apiece, and we're running behind already. Ilyut opens, I 3-bet, and I'm fairly content to get it in with him, I think. I do sort of, I think I make like an in-game decision error or two here as well, where Ilyut will, how do I put this? Ilyut has opened and folded to me a bunch, and I think if I had figured out that, if I had been more aware of this fact in the game, I would have either flatted here or just like 3-bet folded. Not your favorite option with 8s ever, but in game I thought he was sick of my 3-betting at him and, you know, was 4-betting me to fold. I think given his stack and the size of his 4-bet, he's not folding. Also, some of his 4-bet call range is still like ace-jack or better. So when he has ace-jack, ace-queen, ace-king, and all the suited combos in there, for sure, you know, I'm still flipping against that range. So, but I rip it in, and he's got kings. Might seem like a cooler, like a semi-cooler on the surface, but it's really not. Also, like getting back to my shootout macro strategy of I want to get to heads up and, you know, have just any amount of chips heads up and try and that'll give me a chance to win this thing. Well, I don't increase my chances of getting heads up and winning the thing when I'm ripping in like, what do I have left, like 1800 when I lose this thing? Yeah, I'm not increasing my chances of winning this tournament by doing a hand like that. Even if I'm flipping, I'm still not really increasing my chances of winning the tournament. Because 50% of the time I just have 9K in chips, and although I'm chip leader, I'm still not guaranteed to win. And 50% of the time, if you say that I'm always flipping, 50% of the time I have 17 big blinds and have a significantly less chance of winning the tournament. And as you probably know by now, like chips lost in a tournament are greater than chips gained in a tournament. They have a bigger effect on your tournament life than they do than chips gained. So I rip over his open. Not much more to say than I think he has a ton of raise folds, as we've established before. Mikhail 3-bets, and this is a stack size where people are going to be exploiting your people are going to be leveraging you a lot. I thought he had a fair amount of 3-bet folds in his range, and I don't do that poorly against like 6s through 7s, 8s, and 9s. I mean, like the math is pretty much the same anyway, but I don't do poorly against mid pocket pairs when I'm called anyway. So I
I opted to rip in. Could have been like a little bit of frustration in there as well, but also just in terms of ICM, where we said, you know, you have to win this. If I get the same amount as second place for busting out in 6, that's unfortunate. But on the shortest stack, I have the least to gain by sitting around and waiting for a hand than these guys do. So I just opt to rip in. Maybe if there was like, you know, a higher pay jump for 4th or 3rd or something, you know, you could argue for a fold, but I just opt to rip in. I get called by worse. So he got snap marked as a fish, I think, after this. I get there, or I hold, I lose, I get there, whatever you want to call it. Open here and get promptly ripped on. I think game flow wise I should just fold here because he's just going to have a ton of frustration, get it ends here. I don't really have a strong hand against like 2 people who are going to defend a fair amount. So although like I said we were targeting him a little bit, I'm fine just folding, open folding here. Folding first act or whatever you want to call it. Not raising. In open in 2 callers, I'm getting 7.6 to 1. So I need, according to this, an 11% equity hand, which I certainly have. I think squeezing might be slightly better than, I think it might be like quite better than calling if I'm going to call. I thought that Mikhail is not giving up on anything when I squeeze, so I have to run with it a lot too as well. So I took what I felt was like the lower variance approach, although not the strongest approach in this particular spot. Like king bait's calling with a ton, getting odds, Ilyuchenko's going to call a ton, and he's going to be the one, like if he's calling, he's going to be the one I'm in position on, so just the problem was if I make this like 700 or something, Mikhail goes all in, I'm stuck to call him with any 2, so let's see Liv Brie gets in a spot like that at the final table too. I just cannot believe she did that. Goes check around. Turn open ender. Ilyut's leading into 4 people. I don't think I have a ton of implied odds where I get paid if I hit. And I still have 2 people to act behind me. I think this, I'm sure in game I fold. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I don't think it's like I'm getting 3.3 to hit. If I only have 8 outs, I have a 16 to 17% hand. So I'm not getting right face-up odds first off, and then also if I have, say, 6 outs in a spot where I have to hit a straight card that's not a flush card, you know, I have a 12% hand, so, and then again, too, this would be fine if I wasn't getting face-up odds and I thought there was a high chance where he would call additional chips if and when I hit, but I think this is a spot where, like, a 7 or a deuce hits and he's, like, on the check fold, so, yeah. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead, unless someone gets eliminated, we're just going to look at hands that I play. Or we'll show you hands that I'm folding and why, but not get too much into the post, because I don't think anything else really happens. I don't even open there. Against two people that are 20 big blind stacks, and Mikhail seems like super content to just try and rip in all his chips, like 3-bet calling king 10. I'm just going to let that one go. That could get open. Doesn't have to. Against king bait, like who we've kind of established is a little bit spazzy, I just opt not to do that. As you can see, these are all hands that get folded just about in any situation. I get a walk. I open. This is back to my strategy of 3-betting Dude. Suited kings, I said, were included in that range. Lumi flatting, again, is kind of scary, but he's done it once, so perhaps, you know, this is not necessarily a strong hand. I get 4-bet. I think this is always a huge hand and never like a 4-bet fold, so I'm getting the hell out of the way. And I do, as does Lumi. Blinds up to 60, 120. I have a 30 big blind stack exactly. I wish I could show you in depth more, like, you know, how Lumi's like swinging or who's winning chips from who, but I think it's just better to look at the decisions that I had, especially for the first match, and we're kind of running behind on time a little bit too. I don't want this to be like a 300-part episode. I rip in on Lumi. I think this might be I know my in-game decision was, am I going to defend against a 20 big blind stack with a hand that like flops the second best hand a lot? Do I want to fold it, the hand that's good? No. Do I want to defend it? Possibly. But does he have a fair amount of raise folds in his range? Yeah, I think a ton. How do I do against his raise call range? I do fair but not good. His raise call range will include some pairs that have me dominated, and like ace king and ace queen, ace jack. But like, does he have a fair amount of raise folds? For sure. So I rip in, get a fold. I 3-bet Dude again. Like, if I'm gonna be 3-betting hands like king 10 suited and queen 7 suited, I should be 3-betting my strong hands as well. I thought about flatting and maybe trying to let Lumi enter the pot, but I thought I stood to gain more chips by putting in a 3-bet against Dude, and I could be right. I flopped top set on a semi-coordinated board with a flush draw. I think a c-bet is nearly mandatory. We don't really have a dynamic where he's going to be betting when check two, or at least we don't have fair enough reason to assume that we have that sort of dynamic created. So I think c-betting is better. He's semi-stationy, and he's not really betting strong hands like we saw with the 9-8 suited, so I felt betting is much better than checking to induce, because I don't think I induce a lot. I think a lot of his betting hands will be just hands that call anyway, so that's what I go for, and he folds anyway. Still pretty confident that if I check, he's just snap checking back a ton of hands that he would have called with anyway, so back to more of the same. He's hooding out of position. I'm going to be more than content to do, to make this kind of bet. He checks. I'm always c-betting this board. His hand range is fairly strong when he's calling 3-bets, but doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I c-bet a third of the pot and get called. I'm c-betting like a third of the pot, I think, with most of my range here as well, like when I have strong hands and when I have nothing. Diamond hits the turn. I turn a gut shot, but I probably can't have the best hand like when a diamond hits, so I have like pretty much 3 outs most of the time here. So I have a trash equity hand, and I've not gotten like resistance, but I've gotten calls out of a call of a 3-bet and a call of a c-bet from a guy who we thought is pretty weak. So I think double barreling here is a pretty poor choice. Unless I plan on betting and then ripping rivers. And I'm just not willing to do that when, even if I lose this pot, I'll still be in third of 6 and still have an okay chance with 30-something big blinds to come back and win the tournament. So I just opt to just check back. But then bink, I think. So him checking again leads me to believe that his hand range is like never 2 pairs and like probably hovered around like ace 10 or like a king queen queen 10 type hand. Like I think his 2 pairs all bet the river, especially after my line. So I just have to bet an amount that I think is convincing that I'm bluffing, or just like hover it toward like a 1/3 pot value bet. I kind of can't remember what I do here exactly, but I know I get looked up late. I bet exactly half pot. Is that what I do? Pretty close. I mean, maybe this is the best size. I don't really know, to be honest, but I get looked up by king queen. So, yeah, I mean, I think like a pretty weak lookup on his part, but I don't know how I would play it differently in his position. So, and like I'm just lucky that I hit the river. But I put myself in a pretty good position to win a pot in that spot. So, and I like the strategy that I'm employing is overall good. The cards also obviously cooperated as well. I think I just fold to him there. Lumi having 14 big blinds, I have enough raw equity against like just 2 random cards to rip in here. I don't do exceptionally well against this calling range, but like raise folding could possibly be the best option. But raise folding just feels incredibly exploitable when I know he'll just like rip like Jack 10 there, and then I'll just be folding the best hand. So I think actually maybe just ripping is the best, and although it's the second highest variance to raise calling, I think it's probably the best. I hit and then he runs out of straight. The board runouts are irrelevant, but so we still have 50 big blinds. We were lucky in one pot and then not so lucky in another. I'm gonna show king bait to bust out, and then pause to play the second part of match 1. Second half of this will likely go much faster as well because there'll be some bust outs and then we'll just be playing heads ups. So I have honestly no idea what happens this hand. We're just going to show it just for the sake of continuity. Mikhail 3-bet calls against ace 10. King bait gets in king 10, or ace 10, excuse me. He does not win. He's out. Okay, so we're 5-handed now. Mikhail's got some chips. We're still doing okay. And Lumi and Duke are the only ones shorter than starting stack. So, all right. So anyway, this is Chris Moon for Tournament Poker Edge. I look forward to continuing this video series. I hope the strategy and the thought process that I employ, although it might not be standard for open table MTTs, I'm excited about the prospect of getting to talk about shootouts. I think they're amongst my favorite tournament formats to play. So anyway, get ready for part 2, and I'll see you soon.